The boy lay on a cold hospital bench, shivering in pain. His mother begged for help, but the nurse only smirked and pointed toward the charity ward. No one knew that, with one phone call, this tired-looking woman could bring the entire hospital to its knees. The night had started like any other, with Monica Carter rushing home from a long day at work, her briefcase still in the back seat of her car, and her son Jordan sprawled on the couch, finishing his homework. But everything shifted in an instant when Jordan clutched his stomach and cried out in pain, his face twisting with an agony no child should endure. Panic surged through Monica's chest as she knelt beside him, feeling the heat radiating from his small body. With trembling hands, she grabbed her keys and scooped him into her arms, whispering prayers as she sped through traffic toward the nearest hospital. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital cut through the night like a beacon of hope, and Monica breathed a shaky sigh of relief as the sliding doors opened before her. She hurried inside, her suit wrinkled, her hair messy, her expression frantic. To the world, she looked like an ordinary mother fighting against time. She rushed to the front desk, her voice breaking as she pleaded, "Please, my son needs a doctor right now. He's in so much pain." But the receptionist barely looked up, her eyes flicking dismissively toward Monica's tired clothes before sliding to the boy slumped weakly against her shoulder. With an exasperated sigh, the woman slid a clipboard across the counter. "Fill this out," she said flatly, "and take him to the charity care section. That's where people like you belong." For a second, Monica couldn't process what she'd just heard. Her son whimpered, clinging to her blouse, his small body trembling, while the smell of antiseptic and the sound of footsteps echoed around them. She begged again, her voice cracking, "Please, he needs help now." But the nurse only rolled her eyes. In that moment, the hospital's walls no longer felt like a place of healing. They felt like a cage. Monica stood frozen, her son's weak whimpers echoing louder in her ears than the chatter of the waiting room. She looked at the nurse, hoping, begging, for even a flicker of humanity. But the woman only leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen as if Monica were nothing more than an inconvenience. "Charity care," she repeated with a smirk. "Unless you've got cash up front, you'll have to wait. Other patients come first." The words sliced through Monica's chest, sharp and humiliating. Her eyes stung with unshed tears, not just because of fear for Jordan but because of the way the nurse had spoken. Like she was less than human. Like her son's life was worth less because of the way she looked. Around her, the room grew heavy with silence. A few people stole glances at the scene, then quickly looked away, unwilling to get involved. Jordan shifted against her shoulder, groaning softly, his small hand clutching the fabric of her blouse. "Mom, it hurts," he whispered, his voice fragile as glass. Monica bent her head close to him, whispering soothing words she wasn't sure she believed. She lifted her gaze again, her lips trembling but her voice firm. "He's a child. Can't you see he's in pain? Please, just let a doctor look at him." But the nurse rolled her eyes and shook her head, her tone sharp and dismissive. "Ma'am, rules are rules. You're holding up the line." Monica's heart pounded in her chest, fury beginning to seep into her veins, burning hotter than the helplessness she felt. She looked around the waiting room, at the faces pretending not to see, and realized something with painful clarity. To this hospital, she and her son were invisible. That moment, filled with pain, anger, and insult, would become the spark that changed everything. Monica's arms trembled as she laid Jordan gently onto the hard bench in the corner of the waiting room, her heart shattering at the sight of his small body curling in pain. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She had begged. She had pleaded. She had lowered herself to humiliation. And still, they had turned their backs on her child. But what they didn't know, what no one in this room seemed to realize, was that Monica Carter was not powerless. Her wrinkled suit and tired face had fooled them into thinking she was ordinary, but she carried a power that could move entire institutions. Pulling her phone from her purse, she scrolled to a number saved under a simple label, "Bored." Her thumb hovered for only a second before pressing call. When the voice on the other end answered, she didn't raise her tone. She didn't need to. Her words were calm, crisp, and sharper than steel. This is Monica Carter. Effective immediately, shut down all operations at St. Mary's Hospital. Freeze every account. No further services until I say otherwise. Silence followed, heavy and stunned, until the voice stammered back, "Yes, Miss Carter." Right away. As she ended the call, a ripple of tension swept through the building. The phones at the front desk began ringing almost instantly, administrators rushing in, faces drained of color, their voices tight with panic. Doctors who had moments earlier ignored her son suddenly appeared, demanding to know what had happened. The nurse who had dismissed them stood frozen, her smirk replaced with horror. In less than 5 minutes, the atmosphere shifted from indifference to chaos. And as Monica sat back down beside Jordan, stroking his hair with trembling hands, the hospital finally began to realize the truth. They had just humiliated the woman who owned them. The truth spread like a fire no one could contain. Within minutes of Monica's call, the entire hospital was buzzing with frantic whispers. She's the one. The Carter woman, the majority stakeholder. Voices muttered in disbelief, echoing down sterile white halls. Administrators in expensive suits poured into the lobby, their polished shoes clicking against the tiles as they rushed to greet the woman they had just humiliated. Suddenly, every eye in the waiting room shifted toward her, no longer dismissive but wide with shock and fear. The nurse who had sent her to charity care stood frozen, her face drained of color, as the weight of her mistake sank in. Monica didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any words she could have said. Doctors appeared almost instantly, guiding Jordan into an emergency ward with urgent care that should have been offered hours earlier. Monitors beeped, nurses scrambled, and specialists were summoned. Treatment that now came with desperate eagerness to correct the wrong. But the damage had already been done, not to Jordan's health alone, but to the reputation of a hospital that had dared to look down on the wrong woman. Behind the scenes, Monica's legal team was already moving. Emails lit up inboxes, and calls poured into board members' phones, all delivering the same blunt reality. The hospital was in crisis, and the woman they had disrespected held the power to destroy them entirely. By morning, policies would change, rules rewritten, and those responsible stripped of their positions. Yet, in that moment, as Monica watched through the glass window while doctors worked on her son, she didn't feel triumph. She felt something far deeper. The cold sting of knowing that if she hadn't been Monica Carter, her son might have been left to suffer in silence. Hours later, the storm inside St. Mary's had quieted. Jordan lay resting in a private suite, his small chest rising and falling steadily, the worst of his pain eased by the treatment he should have received from the very beginning. Monica sat beside him, her hand gently stroking his hair, her eyes fixed on his peaceful face. Relief washed over her, but so did something heavier, a sadness that no power or wealth could erase. She had saved her son not because the hospital had compassion, but because of who she was, because of the influence her name carried. That truth gnawed at her heart. What about the countless mothers who walked through these same doors every day? Mothers whose children were in pain. Mothers who didn't have her resources, her voice, her power. How many had been turned away, humiliated, and left helpless in the name of policies and prejudices? She thought of that nurse's smirk, of the cold indifference in her voice, and she knew reforms were not optional. They were a duty. The next morning, St. Mary's Hospital announced sweeping changes. No patient would ever again be denied urgent care, regardless of their background or their bank account. Staff were retrained, policies rewritten, and compassion was made a rule, not a choice. The world would never know that Monica Carter was the force behind it. She didn't seek headlines, nor applause. Her only focus was sitting right in front of her, her son, safe, alive, and learning through her example what true strength looks like. As she kissed Jordan's forehead, Monica whispered softly, more to herself than to him, "Power means nothing if it doesn't protect the powerless." And with that, the woman the hospital had once dismissed as ordinary walked away, leaving behind a legacy of dignity that could never again be ignored.